The body parts are bigger, everything is wetter, everything is louder, everything is more colorful.
I'm white, and I've got everything I need. No one clutches their purses when they're in a room alone with me. And I can drive for any neighborhood I please at any hour, and the police don't do a thing. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I got everything I need. I'm a guy getting paid more than a girl with a degree. And I can walk down the streets after dark, no one wants to rape me. And I can get a girl pregnant and just as easily flee. Just like my straight white male dad did to me. So if I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. I've got a pile of broken mirrors and I'm walking under ladders and I'm spilling tons of salt, but to me that doesn't matter, cause my skin and my gender and my orientation are the best things to have if you live in this nation. I recommend it highly. If I see a penny on the ground, I leave it alone and fucking flip it. I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need. Shit's gonna work out for me, cause I'm a straight white male in America. I've got all the luck I need.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do this show live every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific right here on Twitch. That's twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. This is listener and viewer supported programming, so please support in whatever way you can. Tell a friend, give us some money, go buy a hat. New hats coming in a couple days. EchoplexMedia.com, click the support link, and I'm producer Dave, and you can find me on Grindr.
And I am HD Perrin, because we're in HD now. You can find me on Mastodon at hperrin at port87.social.
Hell yeah. So tomorrow being Halloween, we're doing Spooky Cast tomorrow, and I almost put this on the Spooky Cast docket, but then I figured the media wench would leave. And so we're going to do this tonight. This is one of our favorites, Jordy Pete, talking to, her name is Zeena Schreck. No relation to Schreck. Schreck. She is the daughter of founder of like modern satanic church, Anton LaVey.
Do you mean like no relation to the ogre Schreck?
Yeah, no relation to the ogre Schreck. Yes. So I just figured we might as well watch this tonight, because it'll be Halloween for people on the East Coast pretty soon. It's already Halloween for people in Australia. I don't know if that weird country celebrates Halloween, but it's Halloween for them there. And I just figured, we'll do the media wench a solid and make her not throw things at the expensive equipment in her studio tomorrow night. I don't know what this is going to be like. It shows that we started it, but by started it shows that we watched like 4 minutes of it. So maybe I started it and was like, oh no, we got to watch this on the main feed. Anyway, here is Satanism, Fear, Manipulation, and Suffering with Zeena Schreck. No relation.
I'll never get over just how pretentious his intro is.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Today I'm speaking with Zeena Schreck, whose original name was LaVey, and who is the daughter of Anton LaVey, who was the most famous Satanist of the last half of the 20th century. And so she grew up with the man who established the modern Church of Satan. A very intelligent man, very charismatic, very creative, very Machiavellian, psychopathic, manipulative.
I'm going to point out that Jordan is dressed normal for this. He's not wearing like a suit with like Twitter posts on it or anything.
a Carney Barker, an admirer of P.T. Barnum, a man for whom there was a sucker born every minute, a man who...
Well, no, P.T. Barnum didn't just think there was no, it wasn't for P.T. Barnum. P.T. Barnum made that observation. Was it like, oh, for P.T. Barnum, there were suckers born? It was a sucker. No, that was for everybody.
The world was an act and that life was a carnival, and that if you had the wool pulled over your eyes to his benefit, then so much the worse for you. And I suppose as well, you deserve it for being so foolish and gullible. That's the...
I don't think that's what P.T. Barnum meant. I think P.T. Barnum was telling people that as like a warning, like many like entertainers and magicians over the course of time.
Like basically as a I don't want to say cautionary tale because that's not the right word, but like, yeah, just warning people like in this industry, you get taken advantage a lot.
Right. But that's sort of the point of that industry too, is like suspend, like the carnival shows and shit. You were supposed to suspend your disbelief to enjoy the fucking show.
Yeah. But it was more, I take that quote to be more about like, the other things that happen at the carnival that relieve you of your money.
Justification of the Carney Barker psychopath. And Zeena grew up in that household as, by all appearances, a dutiful woman, young woman, committed to the well-being of her father, to the degree where in the 1980s, when a panic about satanic practice arose in the general population, quite a widespread panic, she felt compelled to defend him and took on the mantle of high priestess of the Satanic Church for 5 years before coming to the realization that she had been immersed in a pack of lies, in a web of lies, before understanding as a consequence of the promptings of her conscience that she was participating in something that was not what it claimed to be, and in a life that wasn't what she thought it was. And
oh no, is he gonna go full satanic panic was actually like more like a valid concern? I'm getting the fucking vibe that that's where this is going.
Yeah, I think you're right on there.
By promptings, you might say, of a genuinely religious nature, to forswear the church, to leave her father, and to set out, what would you say, into the desert of her own doubt. And so that's what we talk about. The crazy...
Chat says, like, and I'm going to remix what Chat said. 5 years from now, Michaela Peterson's going to be on my show doing the same sort of thing, talking about her own dad.
1970s,
we can hope.
Hangover from the hedonistic bliss of the summer of love hippies, the dark side of let it all hang out and tune in, turn on, and drop out, right? The catastrophic underbelly of immature hedonism, right? And, well, who better to guide us through that absolute bloody catastrophic mess than the daughter of the prime Satanist from the 1960s and the 1970s? Join us. Zeena, thank you very much for coming to talk with me. And
I feel like you're more knowledgeable about the subject than I am. Is this the church that actually believes in real Satan, or is this the good one that basically they believe like you shouldn't hurt people?
So this is the guy who wrote the Satanic Bible with like the 7 whatever like beliefs.
Okay, the good one.
Well,
the one that they don't actually believe in Satan.
No.
Yeah.
The in fact, to the best of my knowledge, any organized whatever that does believe in Satan seems like it's a myth. I don't think that's really. I mean, I'm not saying no person believes in Satan, but we call those people Christians.
Yeah. I thought there was another like Church of Satanism or something that they did actually believe in Satan. And they're completely unaffiliated with this one. Maybe I'm misremembering.
I don't think that there's any like substantial or notable organization that fits that description. I'm not saying there are no organizations. I'm just saying that I think that it would be like 3 of us meeting in a garage or something.
Everyone today, I guess I'm curious. You've had a very strange life, and I want to describe that. I guess I'm curious to first, for myself, before we delve into any of the details, what do you think we could accomplish with this conversation? What's the utility of the conversation as far as you're concerned?
She's like, I want to get in front of your viewers.
Well, that's a good question. Well, it's also a big question. I suppose.
Damn, we're already at the isn't it great that we're having this conversation part of the conversation.
One question in.
Big
Yep.
picture. Since I don't normally break apart bits of my past to discuss, it only comes up anecdotally in relation to where I am today. I always prefer to live in the present. That's in accordance with my Buddhist practices. But if I were to think of an overall accomplishment of what we get across today, I think it might be to reassure those who might be watching who live in difficult situations or difficult families or really dysfunctional conditions in life that they should not.
So basically, the children of anyone who watched this show.
There is a way out, and to always remember that everything is impermanent. If we
Or anything else on Daily Wire Plus.
and diligence in trying to find our own course that is in alignment with who we truly are. I think that the only thing I really have to offer, because everybody has adversity in their life.
Oh, she's doing that fucking, the fucking like the Austin Bennett speech pattern sort of, where she never really finishes what she's saying. She gets like 2/3 of the way through what she's saying and then kind of starts saying something else.
That's very popular on, like, Jordan Peterson does that. That's kind of popular in that griftosphere.
Yeah, I just used Austin Bennett because it was like the most glaring example of it.
In my case, maybe the only thing I have to offer is that people who are raised with certain conditioning or certain, belief systems that they've learned through childhood that they really never had an opportunity to question, or even if they did question it, they always felt they had to defend it on behalf of their parents, whatever that may be, whether it's religion or politics or corporations or, profession or anything. That if there are people who felt that because of their early life conditioning that they're just stuck and that's their destiny and that's their fate and they really can't do anything about it and there's no way out, that I would at least hope that my life's experiences and my life story can provide a example amongst many others in this world and in history of the fact that if you have strength of character, if you have a greater vision, if you have, a willingness to change, that it is possible to break the conditionings that were placed upon you against your wishes.
She's saying a lot of words, but I'm not really picking up anything meaningful here.
Right. I mean, she could have just said, "Hey, like I just want to show people that they can." What she said at the end is like break out of the conditioning they grew up in.
Yeah.
That was the only thing she said there. But hold on, don't worry. Jordan Peterson's going to say words now.
Against your wishes.
Well, so there's a couple of themes in there that are, I think, personally and sociologically relevant. I mean, we all, what would you say, are the beneficiaries and victims of the actions of the past. And I suppose that's true most proximally with regard to who it is that you have in your family of birth and your parents. And they have their individual idiosyncrasies and talents. And then they are also exemplars of the much broader culture. Now, your father was a very famous man, an extraordinarily controversial person. You know, I was reading the satanic rituals this morning, and back, you know,
Did you try any?
So I kind of caught the tail end of the hedonistic 60s. You know, I'm really a kid of the 70s, and the 70s was where the 60s went to die. So, and
I bet he was hell mad at disco in the 70s.
That the 70s are the hangover of the 60s.
yeah, that's exactly right. The drunken
because
hangover.
It was a really ugly hangover.
Yeah.
Drunken hangover was it was a cocaine. You did the 60s was acid, the 70s was cocaine, and so was the 80s, and then the 90s was Molly.
That's for sure. It really was. And, you know, when I was 18 or 19, I spent a fair bit of time investigating Aleister Crowley and also your father's works and familiarizing myself with the dark side of the 1960s, you know, looking at how that had affected the music, for example, of the Rolling Stones and the vicious underbelly of the, what would you say, carefree hedonism, let it all hang out, tune in, turn on, drop out ethos of the 1960s. It's like, that's all fine, boys and girls, but, you know, there's a pretty dark shadow that comes along with that. And it's like the shadow of the Marquis de Sade for the French Enlightenment.
So I feel like something that Jordan is not really considering here is the people who were like doing and saying that in the 60s were like in their 20s.
Well, not all of them. Like some of the thought leaders were like more in their 40s, like Tim Leary and stuff.
Okay, but like most of them were kids, so it's like they didn't really have a lot of like responsibility, and you know, you can say they shouldn't have that ethos, but like every generation has that ethos when they're like in their teens and 20s.
Right. Like my generation was like grunge music essentially. And it was telling you a lot of the messages were the same, really, is that society rejects you and that you should be a freak.
Yep.
But by be a freak, they meant wear a flannel, even if it's 90 degrees out.
Things that people like to delve into, except carelessly and foolishly, that's for sure, and pridefully. And, you know, it was quite a trip down memory lane in some ways to take a look at this book today, because I haven't thought about those things in relationship to the early 60s or the early 70s and the late 60s for quite a long time. So you were right in the middle of this. And so maybe you could start by telling people who your father was, and then also when you were born, so we can place you exactly in time. And then I think we'll probably go through your life autobiographically and let you tell your story. So why don't you tell everybody who your father was to begin with?
Okay. Yeah. So first of all, you know, I was born in 1963, and my father was Anton LaVey. So he was the founder of the Church of Satan, which coincided with being the founder of modern day Satanism as a coherent kind of organizational, openly public organization for Satanists. Not that Satanism didn't exist before, but it was always, you know, in secret, or it was practiced very differently.
It's like my dad monetized it
From the way my father practiced it. Let me back up.
Focus group tested it.
Clarify something when you were discussing about the hedonism of the 60s and the dark side and the Rolling Stones kind of Altamont type things that were happening.
Rolling Stones was a pop group.
The interesting thing to understand about my father and his organization was that they were a generation older than the hippie generation, and as such they were like mostly comprised of, the members were mostly people who were young in the post-war generation of the 50s. So in a strange way, you could consider that the Church of Satan always considered itself the counterculture to the counterculture, because this
is so weird, because she's fucking describing Jordan Peterson right now. She's describing Jordan Peterson and the IDW, right? There's a way in which they are a counterculture to what counterculture, like from, you know, counterculture, not now, but like when the IDW started or whatever, was like queer people and like people of color, like being like more like outward facing and talking about their experiences. That was sort of the counterculture. It was kind of happening on social media, and the IDW, as someone in the chat just said, it was a reactionary response to the counterculture. And apparently she thinks that this Satanism thing was a response to the hippie movement. I don't know enough about that part. That's like outside of like my range, right? Like, I don't know. We'd have to get like somebody who studied like a sociologist or somebody on who studied these different eras. But she's describing the IDW.
Yeah.
My father was really very anti-hippie. And so this is where it gets complicated, because it doesn't fit into the stereotypical idea one has of Satanism in the occult milieu. So it's a little bit complicated, because my father was anti-occultist, actually, and he was really much more of a performer and a showman. And,
yes, grifter.
Very Machiavellian, of course, in the formation of the church in the way that he did it. So the hedonism that was promoted within the Church of Satan was something different than what was going on in the 60s. So the hedonism within the Church of Satan was more like, I don't know if you recall, but in the 60s, there was this phrase, don't trust anybody over 30, right? Because the 60s was a youth culture generation, and anyone over 30 was considered part of the establishment. Don't trust them. Yet in the Church of Satan, that pretty much summed up a large percentage of the membership, and they were they were very much a part of the establishment, but in the sense that, they were professionals, and they would go to Church of Satan events to sort of live it up, whether it was to meet people that they'd have liaisons with or affairs or whatever, whatever. It was really
a libertarian social club.
It was really not, it's hard to describe, but it was really not what people imagine and what people think. I mean, yes, there was a lot of psychopaths and a lot of deviant people in the Church of Satan. I'm not going to say there wasn't. But the way that transpired was very different than the let it all hang out kind of attitude of the hippies. So my point is, both are problematic. Both are not, so my father's attitude was more like, he was more like P.T. Barnum, who was an inspiration to him. It's like a sucker is born every minute, and it's perfectly logical and valid to take advantage of people that want to be taken advantage of. As long as everybody's enjoying themselves and nobody complains, then but the fact is,
that so far that sounded great. Everybody was enjoying themselves. Nobody was complaining. Where's the sucker part?
Yeah, what does she mean by taking advantage of them in that context? Just taking their money?
Maybe,
like,
but if
you take money for like a beer,
right?
Like,
and
that's just capitalism.
Yeah, and like it's really no different than what Jordy Pete does. Again,
yeah.
Interestingly, he was anti-drug. He was very anti-drug. He was a very law and order kind of person. I mean, we had friends in the police department. I have to say something that I've never said publicly before either, is in my teenage years, I dated a policeman who was a friend of my father's, who was just part of the patrol that was always coming in and out of our house because we needed protection from vandalism and from attacks on the house and threats. And so he fell into a different category than most occultists. And as I say, he didn't even consider himself an occultist. He considered himself more of a more of like doing some sort of like a social experiment in a way of providing that if
So Chad had a theory about what we said, and I think she just confirmed it, that
was based
her dad didn't really believe any of the stuff that he was selling.
Right. He was a
So
showman.
that's what she meant by, he was taking advantage.
on people's base impulses and base desires, that maybe you could take away the stigma of people exercising those base desires. But the problem with that is it was entirely mixed with a lot of neuroses from his own side. I mean, it was very, you could say, postmodern in his way of approaching Satanism and the symbolism of Satan. It really doesn't hold up to scrutiny and academic study and things like that. So, and certainly it doesn't hold up. It certainly doesn't hold up in terms of what constitutes a real religion. It's not a real religion. It's just more like,
Oh, get the Scientology gets to be a religion. Anybody gets to be a religion.
basically. However,
Yeah, why wouldn't Satanism be a real religion?
I was raised with the understanding that it was a religion, and I took that very seriously. And then much later in life, during the 80s, when there was the satanic panic, and then I felt that it was my religion that was being under attack. But more importantly was because I had empathy and compassion for my father.
If Batman gets to be a superhero, then Robin gets to be a superhero, okay?
That was not,
They were clearly a couple.
that he
If
was not
Christianity gets to be a religion,
And yet
Satanism gets to be a
he was
religion.
utterly incapable of defending himself, utterly unwilling to defend himself. That, what I did for that organization was really for my father. It wasn't like, and then subsequently what grew out of that was a sense of responsibility. Like I felt like, okay, somebody needs to just show up and show that these people are real people, that they're not ethereal things that you can just hurl accusations at. And because I knew from experience that the media likes to grab onto boogeymen and make something that is going to inflame and get people very riled up. And you can sell a lot of advertising that way, and you can also create a lot of new jobs that way, and it's good for the economy and all kinds of things like that. So I knew that was happening, but more importantly, I thought that they were imagining that, well, this isn't going to hurt anybody because there isn't really anything as such as Satanism anyway. So we can kind of use this. But in fact, there were people who considered themselves that. And I thought, well, I need to at least be a placeholder to say, this is, a real person whose life you're affecting. And because I felt like I had to protect my father. So what I did was out of necessity and out of love for my father, and fear, because I had a son, fear that my son would be taken away from me by Child Protective Services. So fear, a mother's fear, love for a father, and then yet at the same time, as all that was going on, because I'm jumping forward to the 80s now with the satanic panic period, as all of that was going on, my parents they weren't ever legally married in the first place, but they lived as man and wife. So you could say that they lived as common law marriage. And so they were breaking up. And so there was this immense tension between my two parents and me feeling as though I was being pulled between the both of them. Two narcissistic parents, both saying, either blaming me for being like the other parent or...
I don't mean by any offense by this, but it's interesting that Jordan Peterson is having someone on his show that's more long-winded than he is.
Yeah. And, I wonder if there's been any better interviewers, because like sounds like she's been through it, right? Like what she's describing here is like there was this moral panic with her family kind of at the center of it for people who were like really involved in it. And she was at this time coming of age, and she decided that she was going to go out and try to like, she's like, hey, these are just people that go to this thing. They're not drinking baby blood and all this stuff you guys are saying. These are just people, and you think they're weird. So it'd probably be fun, like for Media Wench or me or somebody to interview her, somebody with like a deeper understanding of the satanic panic and all that. I wonder if that interview's out there. The problem is she's kind of like a chud. I'm not sure, but I would not be surprised to find out that she stormed the Capitol on January 6th. Like,
oh no,
she's kind of out
if
there.
she's going on Jordan Peterson, then yeah.
We found old interviews of her and her boyfriend at the time where they were like talking about weird race and IQ shit, like being very explicit in their descriptions. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like no IDW dog whistles about it. Just just white folks and Asians are just the smart ones. That stuff.
Order me, saying, you have to support me. No, you have to support me, and so there was a lot happening in my life at that time, in combination with what was happening in the country with this national hysteria.
Security is top of mind for many Americans.
This is one of those things where you send them money and they don't send you any gold. This is how you don't buy gold.
The precious metal IRA specialists. Instead of buying gold, you're buying retirement gold, which is just
may as well say the precious metal IOU specialists.
Come buy your retirement gold.
Way to retiring out of it to so again and your family's financial future.
Okay, so I want to delve into some of the characterizations that you touched on in relationship to your father, because he's emblematic of a whole wealth of, what would you say, like a symbolic cluster. You said that, well, you described him as narcissistic, you described him as Machiavellian, but you described him as a showman. You said that, one of his heroes was P.T. Barnum. You described what's the phrase, there's a sucker born every minute. Then you said,
thanks for fucking, all right, thanks for fucking, there's like mirroring in a conversation, but he's just like summarizing, and he's probably not even going to really ask a question here. There's like some interesting stuff she was talking about her being like at this coming of age time during this moral panic. Like there's so much in there that I don't think they're really gonna fucking get it. I don't think Jordan Peterson has like any interest in getting into that part of this, because that's the interesting shit here actually, is like, because she was saying she was a teenager and then she started dating a cop. I'd want to know more about that. And then as the 80s came along, she became she was born in 63, so in 1980 she was 17, and the satanic panic didn't really hit the television until like maybe 84, so then she would have been like 21. And so that's like the interesting shit here, and I think he's just gonna fucking pretend she didn't say anything about that because he didn't want to talk about that shit.
I mean, look at the title of this section on the YouTube video. It's the Machiavellian tendency, Cain and Abel. Instead of
coming of age during a moral panic as the center of the moral panic, which is the next segment that a normal good interviewer would do, because that was the thing to grab onto that she said.
Yep.
Said something very interesting about that, and this is something that everybody who's listening and watching should understand. I mean, one of the things that characterizes a Machiavellian orientation towards life is a proclamation which has an iota of truth in it, which is, if you're stupid enough to let me take advantage of you, if you invite me in to take advantage of you, you deserve everything you have coming to you. Right. Well, and it's a very strange thing. So I don't think that's
Machiavellianism. I think that's being a con artist.
It's vampire rules.
Let me reflect on that in a...
Yeah, somebody in chat is pointing out the stunning lack of self-awareness here.
manner. So in the story of Cain and Abel, Cain is very bitter and resentful because what he's offering to God.
Why does he relate so many things to Cain and Abel?
And didn't you hear her at the beginning say she's a Buddhist? Like she gives a fuck about this?
But seriously, this is like the fourth or fifth time I've heard him relate something that someone said to Cain and Abel. And it's like, if you heard it twice, it would be like acceptable. Like, okay, that's fine. Like 5 times seems like a lot. And I'm not sure it's exactly 5, but it's enough that I'm noticing that he does it a lot.
It's not just in this too. He's been like, ever since he was always sort of like a religious, like preacher guy, but he was trying to hide it more. But ever since he like leaned harder into it, it's one of the stories that he talks about the most.
Yep.
His sacrifices are being rejected. And he essentially makes a case to God that his misery and unhappiness is a consequence of his failure. And God says back to him, no, that's not true. You're missing an intervening variable here, buddy.
Bucko.
You did sacrifice inappropriately.
Hey,
You're not
bucko.
bringing your best to the table. And because of that, you are failing. But
Listen
that's not
here,
why you're
guy.
miserable. You're miserable because something tempted you when you were failing. It's sin that crouched at your door. And you invited it in, and you let it have its way with you. And that's why you're bitter and miserable. And that's a very different causal sequence. Hey, now the reason I'm bringing that up is because the constant
That's a weird way to phrase it. That's a very different causal sequence.
carnival.
Like, I don't think what he's talking about now has anything to do with Machiavellianism or Cain and Abel or the interview subject.
Yep. He's just off in his own world now.
Marker is, and you see this parodied, for example, or explored in Tom Waits' work, and you see it touched on in the work of people like Robert Crumb, is that, if you're the kind of damn fool who invites the predator into your house,
You already said that.
it's like, well, you kind of set yourself up for it and you had it coming. Now, the problem with that is that
I mean, we're watching his show on purpose, so
I don't know where we fit into all this.
I mean, we invited him in, right?
think about it as
Maybe
a
he's
force
right.
of divine vengeance in that regard, ensuring that those who are foolish get their just deserts, also uses that as a justification for their own predatory and parasitical activities, right? Well, of course,
I want her to say, I have no idea what you're talking about.
take advantage of you because, well, first of all, you're probably a thief anyways, and you just hide it with a facade of moral virtue. That's what the Marxists
Yes, there's a lot of
always claim.
justification.
Yes. And then the next thing is, well, if I accept this story that you're a fool and so I'm entitled to deliver you what you deserve, then that justifies virtually anything on my behalf. And so now it's a very complex characterization of your father, but now you also...
I'm sure that was a characterization of her father. He was like all over the place. I fucking wasn't sure who he was talking about.
Cain and Abel? God? Inviting someone into your house? I don't know, man. I'm lost.
Interesting.
I think he does it on purpose.
So you would
He does it because, like, some people, when they get lost, they think, oh, he must be so smart. I think he's just a fucking rambler. He's literally just sitting here rambling incoherently. We should probably take his keys away, take his driver's license away.
20s at that point, despite the fact that your father had this very complex character and was toying with the edges of propriety, let's say, at minimum, you also felt compelled to rise to his defense, and you did that very publicly. And so
Well, not just to his defense. She said to the defense of the people in the organization and the people who other people are calling Satanists. Like, he's missing like what she said. She like went out there and was one of the lone voices. Well, along with, like, crazy enough, the FBI saying that, hey, this isn't really what's going on here. Her and the FBI out there telling local police to, like, stop looking for a Satanist around every corner because it would be better if you solved the crimes.
how would you obviously loved your father, and that in itself.
No,
well,
that I want to clarify that, because a lot of people hold me up as some kind of poster child for adolescent rebellion against parents. And in fact, I was a really dutiful daughter. I really went to bat for both of my parents and all of my upbringing, even though they never came to school to defend me when I was being bullied and picked on.
Well, but that's, you don't want that. That makes it worse if your parents show up. That's the school's job.
You should probably thank them for that.
Yeah. I mean, maybe they could have talked to school administration about it, but other than that, yeah, you don't want that at all.
Yeah, that was like the teachers and the school officials failing, not her parents failing.
But yes, I always felt, until I was an adult and parted ways with my father, I mean, I always felt that we were buddies, that we were really close. And yeah, I mean, obviously I looked up to him as the, Jehovah God kind of archetype, except in Satan form. And which is interesting because I think that's a lot of how his followers do look up to him, as like a kind of satanic Jehovah. So, and they treat him in the same way.
Jordy doesn't know that story.
So it is not really that I was such a rebellious kid. I was a very obedient, dutiful daughter. And there was only, even though I was left on my own quite a lot growing up, my mother and both of them made it clear that there are only certain rules, which is don't do anything that is going to drag us into a negative light, which in hindsight, I think is really funny, because as if they didn't do enough themselves to do that. But I couldn't for example, I didn't have the luxury of having a drug problem. That just couldn't happen, because that would reflect.
She's like, I wanted to fucking have a drug problem, but I just, I didn't have that luxury. You either, right, Jordan?
On my parents. So that was something that, although they were pretty logically open-minded about, if you want to experiment, let us know, and that kind of pseudo-liberal attitude. However, by their behavior and by their by things that my father would say about really being very anti-drug, it didn't take a genius.
Is that a liberal behavior?
Have been happy if I had gone down that route.
Like, I don't mean to derail us, but like, is that something that specifically only liberals do?
That I don't know, but it does seem like she just contradicted herself too, right? Because she said, one thing, I couldn't have a drug problem, but they also told me that if I decided to experiment with drugs, to let them know.
Yeah. It sounds like they just wanted her to be safe and were like, look, if you're going to do drugs, don't do them somewhere where you're unsafe, do them here.
Or just talk to us about it, but also don't do them because we're public figures and it's going to be a mess, which is totally normal.
Is that not something that like happens across the political spectrum? Is that a specifically liberal thing?
I don't know.
I was constantly, keeping myself in check and being sure that I lived up to what his standards were, which was really idiosyncratic, obviously. So what I'm trying to say about
right, but the things that you've described are like, hey, we're public figures. Please think before you act, because we're under a lot of scrutiny right now, which is a normal thing maybe to tell a teenager. And then the other thing she said they did was like, and if you're going to do drugs, I don't know, let us know. What the fuck, dude? I'm missing the part where this is weird. Maybe a little progressive for the way to talk to a teenager about drugs in the 70s, but I don't know. She lived in San Francisco.
Yeah.
About rebellion is I was not a rebellious child. In fact, I always felt like it was us, our little clan, against the world. And I was very rebellious against other authority figures, like in school or out in the world. And I was really a scrappy kind of warrior in that way. But I always felt like there was the core family that was solid and tight. And
sounds like it was.
And I continued to feel that way until the split with my father. And I would even characterize when I severed ties with my father, not as an act of rebellion, but just as simply severance, as putting an end. That was the end, forever. So that wasn't, because rebellion implies a kind of relationship. It implies that a child will test the limits this way, and then the parent will push back that way, and there will be a give and take and a give and take. I never had any of that. Never did any of that. I reached my limit, and then there was a tipping point, and then I was done, and it was a clean severance, and I never went back. And it was not really.
But she was an adult at that time, so like you can't really rebel against someone who's not an authority figure. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know what the circumstances were around her, like not talking to her father. But if she's saying that like her parents were like raising her in a very strange way, yeah, maybe like the Satanic Temple stuff. But then the examples she brought up were just totally fucking normal.
Yeah,
I can't even. Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you two questions about that, because there's another paradox about your father. I mean, in the satanic rituals, for example, it certainly appears that he's perfectly willing to harness, let's say, sexual activity for the purposes of the church. And there is an overlap with a kind of sexual hedonism there. But you also characterize him as someone who essentially had a law and order orientation. Well,
it's not illegal to fuck, Jordan.
Christians famously never fuck.
Very strict with regards, for example, to your own behavior, at least on the drug side. And so those are very difficult things to bring together, right? So you have this Machiavellian person. He's narcissistic. He's a real showman. He's drawing all sorts of attention to your family. And he's a celebrator of what's unacceptable. And yet there's an element of him too that's aligned more with the law and order types. And then you also brought into that your sense. Yep. Go ahead.
No, finish your thought. I'll try to
you also brought
Is it a celebrator of the unacceptable? I don't think that is unacceptable. Like, he describes it as hedonism, but like being promiscuous is not immoral to me.
No.
You know what I mean? Like having multiple sexual partners, as long as everyone is okay with it and everyone knows, seems perfectly fine to me.
Well, and everyone knowing just means that everyone knows that you're not exclusive, right? They don't need to know, right? They don't need to know fucking everything.
Yeah, everyone knows that is the situation.
There's something else that's interesting, which was, you were a dutiful person, and your initial presumption, which I think is the default presumption of a daughter, is that your primary loyalty was to your family, and that you felt that your family was an embattled unit. Now, that is a trick that...
wait a minute. That feels like the Jordan Peterson family.
Felt that your family was an embattled unit. Now, that is a trick that Machiavellians use with people who are close to them, right? They tend to sever their
Jordan.
ties to other people and keep them intensely focused on what's proximal.
I'm very aware of that.
Yeah, and to prize loyalty above all else. And so...
And they use the word we. They use the word we, so that you're dragged into the we.
Yeah, well, and I can't see how, in some ways, how you could have escaped that as a child.
How else are you going to talk about your family? It's we. It's not me and them. It's we.
Especially if you're relatively dutiful in your personality, because you're going to assume, especially if your father's also charismatic, your primary allegiance is going to be to him. And so you believe that was what motivated your participation as a high priestess, let's say in the 1980s, is that you were still on the side of your family. You still believed that your father... Okay, so how did the evidence mount for you that the orientation that you had in relationship to your father was of the sort that would eventually have to be severed? Like, how the hell did you come about that revolution?
Wait, what? Why didn't... The question should be, what led you to break ties with your father after all these years of defending him? That's the question. Well, I don't know why... What the fuck... I don't know why he does that. That's such a weird way to ask the question.
He phrases things weird all the time. He's just a weird man.
That was a gradual process, like most things.
And I honestly do believe that the reason that he does it is because he desperately wants to be perceived as smart to the people in his audience, so that they will look up to him and consider him an authority.
And he does that by maybe talking in ways that you and I find confusing and hard to understand, but maybe somebody susceptible to a Machiavellian narcissist, let's say, might be like, oh, he's smarter than I am because he phrased that in a way, and that's a good turn of phrase.
The way I would describe his language is bloated.
What
he has a very bloated way of speaking.
I think they call that bloviation.
Yep.
That was a gradual process. Like most things in life, things don't just happen out of the blue. Things don't just happen suddenly. There's a lead up. And I've always been a really patient person, and I give people a lot of chances and a lot of benefit of the doubt. And I've always, sometimes stupidly so, but I've always tried to see actually the good in people, even people who are really reprehensive. I've known a lot of people who, by any normal standards of society, you would think that these people are beyond the pale. They're totally psychopathic and horrible. And that's a matter of psychological analysis. That's not for me to say what their diagnoses are. I'm just saying that by normal
we get Dr. K to do that for you.
They would be seen that way. And yet, because I've known such people in perfectly normal, I wouldn't say perfectly, because nothing about my life has been perfectly normal. But I mean, I've known them as in the same way that I'm talking to you now, just talking normally. And so I could always see, I saw the problems in such people, including my father. But in the case of him in particular, that was a gradual process. But because I would always say to him, "What's the party line? What do you want me to say?" I was a mouthpiece for him, but
you weren't necessarily acting in your capacity as his daughter at that point. You were acting in your capacity as his spokesperson, which is kind of fucked up, actually, to have to go out and be your dad's spokesperson. Like never ever happened to the daughter of the Peterson family ever at all for any number of years under interesting circumstances.
Because he would just say, like, he was so out of touch with reality, he would just say crazy things like, talk about celebrities. And that's all he cared about, was that people saw him in an entertaining and exciting and kind of cocktail party conversation kind of way. He really had no.
She's describing Jordan Peterson.
About
God, I would leave the cocktail party.
It is. I want to say it's shocking to me that he doesn't see the parallels, but no, it's not shocking to me that he doesn't see the parallels. It would be shocking to me if he did see the parallels.
Right. And I don't know if she knows that much about Jordan Peterson, but what if she went in there to do this? Like, right? What if she went in there to be like, I'm just going to describe you, actually.
That would be amazing.
Because she's clearly a smart cookie, right? Like, she doesn't always finish her sentences or whatever, but like, whatever. That's not, she clearly has a grasp of what's going on in the world, it seems like. So
about, the phenomena that was happening, that were happening in the country at that time, with innocent people being accused of horrible things. That didn't.
Yeah, he's not going to even grab that, right? She's like, I also felt like she's telling him that this is clear that she also feels like the spokesperson for all these people who are being demonized by the media and local law enforcement during the Satanic Panic, because she was one of the few people going out there talking about this. Jordan Peterson is not going to grab onto that. He wants to know why she stopped talking to her devil-worshipping father, and that's all he wants out of this interview. So
what happened with me is, I would begin kind of having to either I would have to push him a little more, like say, well, I'm not really sure that they're going to want to talk about Jane Mansfield and Marilyn Monroe and things like, and I would say, but, there's people are being accused of being members that aren't even members of the Church of Satan, things like this. And so anyway, what I had to do, because there was a lot of cognitive dissonance happening, what I had to do is be his mouthpiece and yet filter it through my personality, through my conscience. And I had to live with it.
That's why you were a good spokesperson.
I would phrase things in such a way that are
you did a good job for the most part until she I don't know, something weird shit happened. I don't know what happened.
Up to the degree that I was still promoting his vision, and it was never about me. It was always, and I always held him up as the, this is, I'm here on behalf of, and so gradually what happened is some people would start coming forth to me and telling me about things about his life that I didn't know about. People in the public would just say, oh, do you know that it would be horribly embarrassing, but they would say, well, do you know where this part of the Satanic Bible came from? Or do you know where that really came from? And of course, because I lived in a vacuum, in a bubble in my family, so I just accepted. And this is the best way for Machiavellians who are narcissistic, is to get people to be very credible defenders of them, is if you can convince an innocent person that all of your facade is true, and you send them forth, they will be very credulous and they will be very credible and they will seem very convincing. And of course, that's
friend. This is how television commercials work. It doesn't matter actually if whether or not you convince that person. Yeah, you want somebody sympathetic and credible to be just delivering your message. This has nothing to do with Machiavellianism or even narcissism. This is just marketing.
What I have to live with today is I still get so many Satanists that come to my website or come to my social media pages and clueless and say, how can I join? So where do I sign up? And it's like, you didn't get the memo 30 years ago or over 30 years ago. So.
But does your profile say that you're Anton LaVey's daughter?
Disillusionment happened gradually. It wasn't like overnight. And then, of course, like all things that happen gradually, then there's the tipping point. Then everybody freaks out and they say, well, she just blew up over this one little thing. But it wasn't just one little thing. It was an accumulation of too many things. And then the final straw was when he threatened my own life. When, after I had been doing this for 5 years on behalf of him, all of these public appearances, I had been taking the threats, and I had been endangering my own life, showing up in studios where there would be huge hordes of, Christian evangelists that really want to take a baseball bat to my head and, kill me. And I have lots of anecdotal stories about that too, how that's a reality. So what had happened was, the tipping point was that my husband at that time and we were preparing a 25-year anniversary of the Church of Satan. And it was going to be a public performance, and there had the venue, but also the police and the sheriff's department in Los Angeles had been getting a lot of threats and a lot of warnings that if it was going to go on, something really terrible would happen. And interestingly enough,
wait, the police were threatening them?
No. The police had it was chatter essentially. There was chatter about it being
okay. The police were informed of threats.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
But also maybe the other thing.
Because my husband at the time.
This is the LAPD we're talking about.
Considering writing a book about him. That's a whole other subject.
Just tell people who he was.
Richard Ramirez was a serial killer,
The Night
serial
Stalker.
murderer in Los Angeles in the 80s, who self-identified as a Satanist, and he was a follower of my father's. And he's somebody that, the present-day Church of Satan wants to pretend there was no connection to. But here's the thing: as I was
Well, the question, was there a connection, or did he just follow your father's work? Because again, we run into a thing with Jordan Peterson, right? And like his friends like Ben Shapiro and all those other people, were like a non-insignificant number of people who commit acts of violence are followers of the work of IDW figures. So like, what does she mean here?
Yeah.
beginning to represent the Church of Satan on a broader level, in a broader spectrum. And there were some things that began developing in me. And those were realizations that if you are a real religion, you can't pick and choose who is drawn to that religion. I mean, there are Christian murderers too, but each Christian denomination can't just close shop and say, well, you can't join. Because if you are a true religion, you can't.
I mean, maybe you should check with Jehovah's Witnesses before you say that.
Right. Or Scientology. Like they like a lot of religions don't want you to join if you're this, that, or the other.
Yeah.
Religion is something bigger. Religion is.
For a long time, the Mormons didn't even think black people were people.
So then that brought to mind philosophical questions, like well, what is the meaning of it? What purpose does a religion serve actually then to the community? And if we are supposed to be this kind of anti-religion or a counter-religion, what purpose does that serve, and to who? And so it's just a religion of Anton LaVey's personal friends. Well, then that's not a religion, right?
I mean, it could be.
But he had different tiers. He had like his inner circle, and then he had his
disciples,
friends, who in fact were outside of the Church of Satan, people that he liked to feel like he could have a kind of, Machiavellian, and also Rasputin, the Russian monk Rasputin.
Rasputin. Oh, I love that fucking song.
So that is how religions start. Like, religions start with usually a guy having an inner circle of, high level people in this influential group that attracts more and more people. And then eventually the leader dies and it becomes, a full blown religion like Scientology did.
Right. And I don't.
Very influenced.
I don't know what part of the Rasputin story she's talking about, because that dude just fucked everybody.
He felt that through knowing people in influential circles, whether it was in the entertainment field or other fields, that that he could have some sort of influence over them in some way, in their decision making, things like that. But then he had the laity of the Church of Satan, which, of course, because he was so in his youth, he was very influenced by the carny life, So the laity is what we always referred to as the rubes. Those were the paying customers. The laity were...
that's definitely Scientology.
He would say they're the stuffing in the mattress.
I mean, that's all religions.
Right. She's just describing an organization with a hierarchy. It's not just a religion. You can describe Apple computers that way too, right? The laity she's talking about is the customers.
Yep, that's true.
This is just any structure, any like hierarchical structure is going to work this way.
Yep. You got the people that are there for the service. You got the people that are there to provide the service, and the money flows in one direction.
Right.
The bills.
Starting a business can be tough, but thanks to Shopify, that we'd use a
Oh, boo! Shopify, boo!
You're not going to see a commercial for during this fourth wall.
Good.
No matter what.
So apparently, don't use Shopify ever.
JBP.
Right. So that carnival association is extremely.
I wonder if Jordan Peterson's university runs on a Shopify website.
I'm a real, what would you call, aficionado of the early Disney classic animated movies. And I've spent a lot of time, for example, lecturing about it, walking through the story of Pinocchio. And there's a lot of mysteries in that animated.
He spent a lot of time lecturing about the story of Pinocchio.
Also, isn't that just one of many stories that Disney stole from someone else?
Yes. I mean, not stole because it was in the public domain, but reappropriated.
Somebody in chat's like, aha, he's a Disney adult. Everything makes sense now.
Which is about the attempts of someone striving forward to free themselves from the invisible strings that control them, right? Because Pinocchio's a marionette and he's trying to become a real person. Well, the first temptation that he encounters, this took me a long time to figure out. The first temptation he encounters is to become an actor. Like he gets picked up by the coachman, this Italian character, who's a traveling carny, and he's put on the stage as a puppet, right? And the Italian carnival director claims that he's going to make him a star, but imprisons him essentially. And it took me a long time to understand. I thought, well, this is so strange because this is a Hollywood movie, and yet actor is put in an extraordinarily negative light. And I thought, actor. And then it seems obvious in retrospect, but it wasn't to begin with, that, well, it's a parody of
I want her to break in and say, I didn't come here to talk about fucking Pinocchio.
an actor is to have all of the what would you call the trappings of the real thing,
Well,
but
that's your
not to do any
persona.
of the work. Exactly. It's the
This guy has thought way too much about Pinocchio.
You're tilting continually towards.
Also, it's really weird that he keeps referring to it as a Hollywood movie, because I'm not even sure Disney Studios were in Hollywood at the time. I could be wrong. But also, the story wasn't written by Disney. So they were adapting it for an animated thing. So they
That may have been a part of the story that Disney added.
or maybe a part
but-
that maybe they left it out. Maybe he was reading the original book and it wasn't, you know what I'm saying? Who knows?
But also, Hollywood making fun of Hollywood is an extremely Hollywood thing to do. Does he not know that?
Right.
Description of your father essentially as a carnival barker. And you said, for example, that when you were trying to work through some of the deeper philosophical implications of the accusations that were coming your family's way, his insistence constantly was to play up his association with high-level celebrities, right? And to become so, I mean, so the actor issue is it's a continuation of the great game idea. So you say, well, there's a sucker born every minute. It's perfectly reasonable and even right to prey on the gullible because they deserve it. But then there's a deeper justification underneath that, which is something like, well, everything is a great show anyways, right? There's nothing real. That's kind of the postmodern element. There's nothing real.
Oh, I hate when I'm not even going to do it. That's not what postmodernism means. That's what QAnon was telling everybody. This is all a movie. Enjoy the show.
Who's successful isn't successful because they've actually contributed something real. They're successful because their act worked. And so I might as well have an act. And your father was obviously, I mean, with the carnival surround, that really becomes tangible because a carnival is all about taking a break from the duties and responsibilities of life and celebrating the orgiastic and the odd and the lustful and
Orgiastic, he got that from Gad Sad. Remember when we counted the orgiastics in a Gad Sad video?
and there's an attraction of that carnival barker who's often represented in literary symbology as a, what would you say, an invitation to the satanic realm, right? That's why you see in Stephen King, for example, and Ray Bradbury, it's very, very, or in movies that use the trope, let's say, of the serial killer, is often terrible things are going on behind the scenes in a carnival, right? It's a place of dark magic. And so your father obviously was part of that world. And is it
So I believe that is just because carnivals are a fun place. So you're subverting the expectation of that.
Right. Yeah. And it also kind of plays into like negative stereotypes about the people who traveled with the carnival. But yeah, the carnival's
Yeah,
fun. So
true.
if you make like a creepy carnival, yeah, it's the inversion of like what the kids are supposed to do, and that makes it more scary. Yeah,
Like that's the whole idea behind like scary clowns.
right. Some people are just afraid of clowns, but that's different.
That it was all a great show and that he was
No,
staging a
here's the thing.
theater. Okay, yeah.
Here's the thing, is I believe that in the beginning, he really believed that he would, I think that he really believed that so-called normal society, straight society, normal, regular middle-class society, that they were corrupt in their way. So I'm sure he had some early life experiences. I'm sure he had early life experiences that disillusioned him and caused him to take a dim view of society and the double standards and the corruption and things like this. But here's the thing. A lot of people get that too. But not everybody thinks, well, then I'm going to take revenge and I'm going to flip the script. And I'm going to flip the script and I'm going to do it. I'm going to do one up on that. And so, but I think in the beginning, with the help of my mother, I must say, because my mother, don't forget, was 50% of the development of the Church of Satan as well. And she had her own personality and she had her own, makeup from her past and her family and things like that. So, and she very often was like a balance to him, but sometimes she was also someone who was pushing him from behind the scenes too. Go further, and setting, she was his PR agent. She was the administrator of the whole, she built up the Church of Satan in the administrative sense. So if my father had not had my mother, who was young and naive and really looked up to him when she first met him and admired his talent, his creative abilities, and he was a raconteur. He could talk for hours and hours.
Oh, you don't say.
And so she didn't mind.
I think she might be just in there fucking throwing daggers at this guy without him noticing it.
The behind the scenes position of doing all the work of creating and building up.
Okay, so she did the work. Because that's curious, because a man like your father, given his temperament, highly entrepreneurial, highly open, highly creative, but also with that Machiavellian and narcissistic tilt, it isn't obvious at all that he'd be willing to do something like the administrative work that would be necessary to build anything approximating an organization. So your mom did, okay, but you also characterized your mom very briefly also as narcissistic. Now, you said she was also young.
Yes,
how much of an age gap was there? 11
years.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. 12 years.
Okay. And how old was she when he met her?
17.
Okay. So that explains something right there. Right. So he's just about 30 at that point and she's 17.
Well, he turned 30 right when they met. And then a couple months later, she turned 18.
Right. And she was drawn to him because he was magnetic but now you also characterized.
At the time.
Well, she doesn't sound like you exactly, right? Because you said you were dutiful and you were actually striving to aim up, and you were trapped in a situation where up looked like what your father was doing from within your family.
So I'm like,
did she describe her mom as not dutiful?
Yeah, all she did was said that my dad was the show person and my mom handled the business side of the fucking the church or whatever. That's what I heard.
Yeah, and now Jordy is saying your mom doesn't sound like you. Like, that's rude.
Right. Or nice. I don't know. Depends on who you like and who you don't like. Why you like them, why you don't like them.
But you characterized your mother as narcissistic. So tell me more about her role and her personality.
Yes, but she was narcissistic in a different way. She was not, and before I understood more about narcissism and really did some deep studying about all of the different kinds of narcissists and different traits that different ones have, I used to think, in just my own definition, as I used to think of her as a narcissist by proxy because her narcissistic feed was in being a martyr to the great narcissistic genius, my father.
Okay, sure.
She was the martyr. So she had no time for me. She was an absentee mother in my life. She passed off her mother duties onto other people. So my grandparents or people in the neighborhood, other church members, my sister. She had absolutely no time for me. And because I was the only child of the both of them.
So a narcissist by proxy really doesn't make sense. That seems like an oxymoron to me.
Well, maybe she meant to say that she used to believe that her mother was enabling her father, the narcissist.
Okay. Yeah.
My sister was born when my father was very young. He was only 21 years old when my sister was born. So she, in her formative years, she knew a very different person than the one I was raised with. And she actually had probably a more fun early childhood because it was more a normal kid's childhood, you know. I mean, yeah, they had, she always describes it as they had kind of an Addams family existence, a kind of Addams family home. They were quirky and they had unusual pets like tarantulas and snakes and things like that.
That's cool as shit.
As malignant as inviting psychopaths, opening your door to the public and letting, you know, any walk of life come through, and you've got two young daughters. It's like the irresponsibility factor increased in the ensuing years. And as my sister was a teenager,
I don't think that's necessarily irresponsible.
So my sister being considerably
Right, it just depends on
if there's a certain amount of vetting, I think that could be fine. But when she says all walks of life, what exactly does she mean by that?
Well, the other thing is, like, or do the kids have their own space they can like retire to? And you know what I'm saying? Is there are there parts of the space that are not open to the public?
Yeah.
Me. And as a teenager, she could pretty much handle herself. She didn't have to be, although the strange thing is my mother used to say that I was allowed to participate in the rituals because I was precocious, whatever that means. But I think that was more of a justification in my mother's mind that if she said that I was more resilient and more precocious and more mature in my in my dealings with people, because I actually was, as a child, I was kind of, I don't know, scrappy is the only way I can describe it, because like I would talk back at some of the members when they would say I was just being shy or something. I was an introverted child, and I still am an introverted person. I think my basic baseline is leans towards contemplative activities and pastimes, and I tend to be more thoughtful and think things out. So I'm more introverted in the stereotypical ways. So as a child, you know, sometimes members would say, "Oh, she's just shy. She's she doesn't have the confidence to talk." And I would actually confront them and say, "I'm not shy. I have nothing to say to you."
Right.
Oh, that's pretty good.
Because I'd see
For a teenager,
people,
I'm not shy. I just don't want to talk to you.
see all these adults acting like blithering idiots, you know, just drunk and falling all over the place. And not really, I mean, I'm not saying they were participating in orgies and things like that, but they were just gross. You know, they were just a lot of.
Like, I don't want to talk to you. You're gross.
To the parties, and that would party after the rituals and stuff. It was just gross. So no, I didn't have anything to say to people like that. But to be fair, then there were also other members of the Church of Satan too, who were not like that, who, you know, whether they were creative types or they lived a different lifestyle from that kind of sneaking around behind your spouse's back kind of, you know, swinger club mentality. There were other people that didn't fall into that category, but they did not tend to stay long, I have to say. They
That's as good a place as any, I suppose, to end the podcast part of this. Just my like, just real quick, anything of value or interest she said Jordan Peterson seems to have ignored.
Yep.
Particularly the part about as she came of age, she was now the spokesperson for this organization that was at the center of a moral panic, and she was not only like the spokesperson for her parents and the organization, but also she felt in a way that she was a spokesperson for the people who were being wrongfully accused of being Satanists or being like bad because of their, some heavy metal music. They played D&D, the whole thing. She sort of felt like she was the spokesperson for those people as she like came of age. And that's some interesting shit. And Jordan Peterson seems not to even heard it.
Yeah, it definitely seemed like Jordan had like a narrative that he wanted to follow. And rather than like let her lead the conversation and like he just guide it, he decided that he would lead the conversation no matter what she said.
Right. And that's, it's good to have like a set of, like if I interview somebody, right, I try to like make sure we get I have a set of things, but if somebody says something interesting, I'm going to try to pick up on that.
Yep.
And that the most interesting thing she said was about as she came of age, she became a spokesperson for basically all the fucking weirdos. And that's got to be real hard. And we didn't, I guess her father threatened to kill her or something, but we didn't really get into that. That might have been interesting to be like, well, what were the circumstances around your father threatening to kill you? Like, how'd that happen? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I would be interested to see someone who's actually good at interviewing people interview her.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, we can I can add it to the cults and satanic panic stuff. So what's really interesting is I looked through, you probably saw me kind of scrubbing across the bottom. They didn't really get into the satanic panic so far as I could tell. Like in the
so the title was clickbait.
Right. Or just that I don't think Jordan Peterson has much. She kept trying to like bring it up. I don't think he has much interest in that, primarily because I just think that he's a driver of a current moral panic that isn't entirely different than the satanic panic in a lot of ways, especially when you think about the guests he has on, and especially when you think he's friends with that guy that believes in actual demons.
Yep.
So, yeah, I wish there would have been more there, but I'm also like not surprised that there wasn't, just based on like who the interviewer was. And I will like try to remember to find a better interview of her. It's not appropriate really necessarily for the Intellectual Dollar Tree, but if you wanted to come on Satanic Panic with us some night, watch that with us. That'd be great.
Yeah, if you had an interview with her and someone other than Jordan Peterson, yeah, I would definitely join in. So let me know.
Cool. Well, do you want to read the show out?
All right. Thank you for tuning in to the Intellectual Dollar Tree. We do this show every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific on twitch.tv/Echoplex Media. If you want to check out our other shows, you can do that on echoplexmedia.com. And if you want to support us, you can do that at patreon.com/Echoplex or eplex.store, where you can buy our cool merch like the tinfoil hat Dave was wearing tonight. If you're here live, stick around after the song we're about to play. We change the color of the lights and the contents of the drinks, and we keep the show going. If you're not listening live, maybe check it out sometime. Now here is Boomers by Periscope.